Book 1, Part 1. The most fundamental difference among philosophies. When people are investigating any subject, the likely result is either the discovery or a denial of discovery and a confession of inapprehensibility, or else a continuation of the investigation. This, no doubt, is why in the case of philosophical investigations, some have said that they have discovered the truth, some have asserted that it cannot be apprehended, and others are still investigating. Those who are called dogmatists, in the proper sense of the word, think that they have discovered the truth. For example, the school of Aristotle and Epicurus and the Stoics and some others. The schools of Clitomachus and Carneades and other academics have asserted that things cannot be apprehended, and the skeptics are still investigating. Hence, the most fundamental kinds of philosophy are reasonably thought to be three: the dogmatic, the academic, and the skeptical. The former two will be appropriate for others to describe. In the present work, we shall discuss in outline the skeptical persuasion. By way of preface, let us say that on none of the matters to be discussed do we affirm that things certainly are just as we say they are. Rather, we report descriptively on each item according to how it appears to us at the time. Part 2. The accounts constitutive of skepticism. The skeptical philosophy contains both a general and a specific account. In the general account, we set out the distinctive character of skepticism, saying what the concept of it is, what are its principles, and what are its arguments, what is its standard, and what is its aim, what are the modes of suspension of judgment, how we understand skeptical assertions, and what distinguishes skepticism from neighbouring philosophies. The specific account is the one in which we argue against each of the parts of what they call philosophy. Let us first deal with the general account, being our sketch with the names given to the skeptical persuasion. Part 3. The nomenclature of skepticism. The skeptical persuasion, then, is also called investigative from its activity in investigating and inquiring, suspensive from the feeling that comes about in the inquirer after the investigation, aporetic, either, as some say, from a fact that it puzzles over, investigates everything, or else from its being at a loss whether to assert or deny, and Pyrrhonian from the fact that Pyrrho appears to us to have attached himself to skepticism more systematically and conspicuously than anyone before him. 4. What is skepticism? Skepticism is an ability to set out oppositions amongst things which appear and are thought of in any way at all. An ability by which, because of the equivalence in the opposed objects and accounts, we come first to suspension of judgment and afterwards to tranquility. We call it an ability, not in any fancy sense, but simply in the sense of to be able to. Things which appear, we take in the present context to be objects of perception, which is why we contrast them with objects of thought. In any way at all can be taken either with an ability, or to show that we are to understand the word ability in its straightforward sense, as we said, or else with to set out oppositions among the things which appear and are thought of. We say in any way at all because we set up oppositions in a variety of ways, opposing what appears to what appears, what is thought of to what is thought of, and crosswise, so as to include all oppositions. Or else we take the phrase with the things which appear and are thought of to show that we are not to investigate how what appears, or how what is thought of, but are simply to take them for granted. By opposed accounts, we do not necessarily have in mind affirmation or negation, but take the phrase simply in the sense of conflicting accounts. By equivalence, we mean equality with regard to being convincing or unconvincing. None of the conflicting accounts take precedence over any other as being more convincing. Suspension of judgment is a standstill of the intellect, owing to which we neither reject nor posit anything. Tranquility is freedom from disturbance or calmness of soul. We shall suggest in the chapter on the aim of skepticism how tranquility accompanies suspension of judgment. 5. The skeptic. The Pyrrhonian philosopher has been implicitly defined in our account of the concept of the skeptical persuasion. A Pyrrhonian is someone who possesses this ability. 6. The origins of skepticism. We say that the casual origin of the skeptic way is the hope of attaining ataraxia. Certain talented people, upset by anomaly in the facts and at a loss as to which of these facts deserve assent, endeavoured to discover what is true in them and what is false, expecting that by settling this they would achieve ataraxia. But the main origin of skepticism is the practice of opposing to each statement an equal statement. It seems to us that doing this brings an end to dogmatizing. 7. Does the skeptic dogmatize? Then we say that the skeptic does not dogmatize. We are not using the term dogma, as some do, in its more common meaning, something that one merely agrees to. For the skeptic does not give assent to the pathei that are forced upon him by fantasia. For example, when feeling hot or cold, he would not say, "I seem not to be hot or cold." But when we assert that he does not dogmatize, we use dogma in that sense, which others give it, of assent to one of the non-evident matters investigated by the sciences. For the Pyrrhonist, assents to nothing that is non-evident. Not even to putting forward the skeptic slogans about not evident things does he dogmatize. Slogans like "nothing more" or "I determine nothing," or any of the others of which we shall speak later. For the dogmatizer propounds a certainty, the thing about which he is said to be dogmatizing. But the skeptic does not put forward these slogans as holding absolutely. He considers that Just as the all things are false slogan says that together with the other things, it is itself false, as does the slogan nothing is true, so also the nothing more slogan says that it itself is no more than the case that it's opposite, and thus it applies to itself along with the rest. We say the same of the other skeptic slogans, so that since the dogmatizer is one who posits the content of his dogmas as being true, while the skeptic presents his skeptical slogans as implicitly self-applicable, the skeptic should not be said to dogmatize thereby. But the most important point is that in putting forward these slogans, he is saying what seems to him to be the case and is reporting his pathos without belief, not firmly maintaining anything concerning what exists externally. 8. Does the skeptic have a system? We proceed in the same way when asked whether the skeptic has a system. If one defines a system as attachment to a number of dogmas that agree with one another and with appearances, and defines a dogma as an assent to something non-evident, we shall say that the skeptic does not have a system. But if one says that a system is a way of life that, in accordance with appearances, follows a certain rationale, where that rationale shows how it is possible to seem to live rightly being taken not as referring only to virtue, but in more ordinary sense, and tends to produce the disposition to suspend judgment, then we say that he does have a system. For we do follow a certain rationale that, in accord with appearances, points us towards a life in conformity with customs of our country and its laws and institutions, and with our own particular patho. 9. Does the skeptic theorise about nature? We reply in the same vein if asked whether the skeptic needs to theorise about nature. On the one hand, if there is a question of making an assertion with firm confidence about any of the matters dogmatically treated in physical theory, we do not theorise. But on the other hand, in the course of opposing to every statement an equal statement, and in our connection with ataraxia, we do touch upon physical theory. This too is the way we approach the logical and ethical parts of so-called philosophy. 10. Do the skeptics deny appearances? Those who claim the skeptics deny appearances seem to me not to have heard what we say. For as we stated above, we do not reject the things that lead us involuntarily to assert in accord with a passively received fantasia, and these are appearances. And when we question whether the external object is such as it appears, we grant that it does appear, and we are not raising a question about the appearance, but rather about what is said about the appearance. This is different from raising a question about appearance itself. For example, the honey appears to us to be sweet. This we grant, for we sense the sweetness. But whether it is sweet, we question insofar as this has to do with the philosophical theory. For that theory is not the appearance, but something said about the appearance. And even when we do present arguments in opposition to the appearances, we do not put these forward with the intention of denying the appearances, but by way of pointing out that the precipitancy of the dogmatist. For if the theory is so deceptive as to all but snatch away the appearance from under our very eyes, should we not distrust it in regard to the non-evident, and thus avoid being led by it into precipitate judgment? 11. The criterion of the skeptic way. That we hold to the appearances is obvious from what we have said about the criterion of the skeptic way. The word criterion is used in two ways. First, for the criterion that is assumed in connection with belief about existence or non-existence, and that we shall discuss in our objections. And second, for the criterion of action, by attention to which, in the conduct of daily life, we do some things and not others. It is of the latter that we are now speaking. Accordingly, we say that the criterion of the skeptic way is the appearance, in effect, using the term here for the fantasia. For since this appearance lies in feeling and involuntary pathos, it is not open to question. Thus, nobody, I think, disputes about whether the external object appears this way or that, but rather about whether it is such as it appears to be. Holding to the appearances, then, we live without beliefs, but in accordance with the ordinary regimen of life, since we cannot be wholly inactive. And this ordinary regimen of life seems to be fourfold. One part has to do with the guidance of nature, another with the compulsion of the pathe, another with the handing down of laws and customs, and a fourth with instruction in arts and crafts. Nature's guidance is that by which we are naturally capable of sensation and thought. Compulsion of the pathe is that by which hunger drives us to food, and thirst makes us drink. The handing down of customs and laws is that by which we accept the piety in the conduct of life as good, and impiety bad. And instruction in the arts and crafts is that by which we are not inactive in whichever of these we acquire. And we say all these things without belief. "12. What is the goal of skepticism?" After these remarks, our next task is to explain the goal of the skeptic way. Now the goal or end is that for the sake of which everything is done or considered, while it, in turn, is not done or considered for the sake of anything else, or it is the ultimate object of the desires. We always say that as regards to belief, the skeptic's goal is ataraxia, and that as regards things that are unavoidable, it is having moderate pathe. For when the skeptic set out to philosophize with the aim of assessing his fantasia, that is, of determining which are true and which are false, so as to achieve ataraxia, he landed in a controversy between positions of equal strength, and being unable to resolve it, he suspended judgment. But while he was thus suspending judgment, there followed by chance the sought-after ataraxia as regards belief. For the person who believes that something is by nature good or bad is constantly upset. When he does not possess the things that seem to be good, he thinks he is being tormented by things that are by nature bad. And he chases after the things he supposes to be good. Then, when he gets these, he falls into still more torments because of irrational and immoderate exaltation, and, fearing any change, he does absolutely everything in order not to lose the things that seem to him good. But the person who takes no position as to what is by nature good or bad, neither avoids nor pursues intensely. As a result, he achieves ataraxia. Indeed, what happens to the skeptic is just like what is told of Apelles, the painter. For it is said that once upon a time, when he was painting a horse and wished to depict the horse's froth, he failed so completely that he gave up and threw his sponge at the picture, the sponge on which he used to wipe the paints from his brush, and that in striking the picture, the sponge produced the desired effect. So too, the skeptics were hoping to achieve ataraxia by resolving the anomaly of phenomena and noumena, and being unable to do this, they suspended judgment. But then, by chance, it were, when they were suspending judgment, the ataraxia followed, as a shadow follows a body. We do not suppose, of course, that the skeptic is wholly untroubled, but we do say that he is troubled only by things unavoidable. For we agree that sometimes he is cold and thirsty and has various feelings like these. But even in such cases, whereas ordinary people are affected by two circumstances, namely by pathe themselves, and no less by seeming that these conditions are by nature bad, the skeptic, by eliminating the additional belief that all these things are naturally bad, gets off more moderately here as well. Because of this, we say that as regards belief, the skeptic's goal is ataraxia, but in regard to things unavoidable, it is having moderate pathe. But some notable skeptics have added suspension of judgment during investigations to these. 13. The general modes of epoch. Since we have been saying that ataraxia follows on suspending judgment about everything, the next thing would be to explain how we reach this suspension. Roughly speaking, one may say that it comes about through the opposition of things. We oppose phenomena to phenomena, or noumena to noumena, or alternatively. For instance, we oppose phenomena to phenomena when we say that the same tower appears round from a distance but square from close up, and noumena to noumena when, in reply to one who infers the existence of divine providence from the order of the heavenly bodies, we oppose the fact that often the good fare ill and the bad fare well, and deduce from this that divine providence does not exist, and noumena to phenomena, as when Anaxagoras argued, in opposition to snow's being white, that snow is frozen water, and water is dark in colour, and therefore snow is dark in colour. Or with a different concept of opposition, we sometimes oppose presenting things to present things, as in the foregoing example, and sometimes present things to things past or to things future. For example, when somebody brings up argument that we are not able to refute, we say to him, just as before the birth of the person who introduced the system which you follow, the argument supporting that system did not yet appear sound, although it really was. So also is it possible that the opposite of the argument you know advance is really sound, despite its not yet appearing so to us. And hence, we should not yet assert this argument that now seems so strong. But in order that we may more accurately understand these oppositions, I shall set down the modes of arguments by means of which suspension of judgment is brought about, without, however, maintaining anything about their number or their forces. For they may well be unsound, and then may be more than the ones I shall mention.